Hi everybody, welcome to this event. This is run by 9 Dots and CRASSH, which is the Centre for Research in the Arts, Social Sciences and Humanities at the University of Cambridge. My name is Joanna Page and I'm the director of CRASSH. With me is Jane Tinkler, who's the Senior Prize Manager at 9 Dots. Together we're going to introduce you to the 9 Dots Prize and to answer a wide range of questions that have been sent in advance. Jane, over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm so delighted that you've all joined us today to hopefully get a bit more of an idea about the 9 Dots Prize, and hopefully we're going to persuade you to apply for the prize this time round. So let's start. What is the 9 Dots Prize? Well, we sometimes describe ourselves as a sort of backwards book prize in that we're giving a prize to a book that doesn't actually exist yet. But we look at sort of big societal questions. So we ask a question every 2 years, and so we get all of our applicants to sort of really try and think about ideas around these big questions. You're looking now at our 3 winners and their books. So our first question was, are digital technologies making politics impossible? And our winner there, James Williams, had worked at Google for a long time and then had become a PhD student looking at digital ethics. And so he brought sort of both sides of that, sort of the academic side and the company side to his answer. Now, do remember, you can read all 3 of these books for free on the 9 Dots Prize website, because we make sure that the winners' books are available for free as soon as they're published. We judge the prize anonymously, and we do that with a group of 12 board members drawn from academia, from business, from journalism, from civil society, and Joanna is one of our board members for this coming cycle. And I think the fact that we judge this anonymously is really important. It sort of means that we can focus on the ideas, the writing that you submit to us, not necessarily where someone is based or whether they have a particular position in a company or a university. And so we're really able to sort of really focus down on the ideas in your entry. So I wanted to do a sort of very quick kind of my really top tips when you're thinking about applying. And I thought it would be really nice to illustrate these points with some quotes taken from a set of podcasts that we've done to, again, try and help people think about some of these issues when they're applying. So again, they're on our website, so do have a look at them. There's some really fascinating discussions on there. But my top tip number 1 might seem a bit obvious, but actually really engage with the question. We do find that some people sort of think maybe that, as David says here, that this is a sort of a starting point and they can go off, you know, into all sorts of flights of things. But actually, we've set this question for a reason, and we'd really like you to engage with it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you come up with the perfect answer. We're not expecting a yes or no answer to these, but we'd really like you to engage with the question and you know, really make your entry sort of in the area that we're asking about. Secondly, that your ideas should really stand out. Sometimes I think we should actually call this an ideas prize rather than a writing prize, because we really need you to have something to say when you're submitting your entries to us. It could be very beautifully written, but if there's not really a thrust to it, if there's not really a point to your entry, then it's not really going to be the thing that grabs the judge's attention. And Adam Kay here, the quote is sort of one way to really try and make sure that your ideas stand out is if they're really important to you. You know, this might be an area that you work in, this might be an area you've experienced something, you, yourself, your family, might be something that you're just really passionate about, and that will be one of the ways that you can really make that come over to the judges. Point number 3 is about we ask that you evidence your answers with sort of research or experience. And this is something that people can feel a little bit uncomfortable about. I don't think you need to, but what that means is we're not looking for purely opinion-driven pieces, but research could take a number of different forms. It could be sort of academic research, it could be journalism, it could be personal experience. You've experienced something in this area, your family members, your colleagues, your friends, something that you've seen that really spoke to you, and you want to sort of base your response around that. All of those things are completely acceptable, but there has to be something there to sort of show why you think this, or how you think that this is a good way to answer the question. We also sometimes, point 4 is about what your book would look like. We sometimes get some very beautifully written 3,000 word summary responses, but it's very difficult for the judges to see how that would translate into a full book. So I thought this quote by Helen Chertsky was a really lovely way of thinking about it. You might not have all the answers yet, you know, you haven't written a book, but actually you're trying to say to the judges that I've got some really interesting things that I want to look into. I've got a really interesting journey that I think I'd like to go on. And as you say there, wouldn't you like to come on this journey with me? And I thought that was a really nice way of thinking about how you link your book outline, which we do also ask for, to your summary response. And we'll come back to a bit of that. Some of the questions are around that later on. Finally, my point 5 do apply. We do often get people saying, oh, this isn't for me, this is such a big amount of money, a contract with Cambridge University Press, that you can't want to hear what I have to say. And I thought these quotes were really lovely, both from 9DOT's board members. So firstly, from Bibi Bikara Youssef, you know, she sort of says, people have also said to her, who's going to read the kind of stuff that I would write? And she's saying, we want to hear from all sorts of people about all sorts of things, writing in all sorts of different styles. If not you, who else? And I think that's a really nice way to encourage you all to think about applying. But also Bettina Gapper's point here, that we hope that you will get something from the process of creating your entries. And we do also hope that they have a life outside the prize. Obviously, we can only have one winner, but we do know that people go on to sometimes publish their entry, sometimes go on and write the book anyway, even if it's not the one that's won the 9DOTS prize that year. As Bettina says, it might not be the big idea we're looking for this time round, but that doesn't mean it's not a big idea. So I think there's some value in applying for the prize, even if you don't win. So I just wanted to talk about some very sort of, I guess, the technical points about submitting and eligibility. Firstly, all of the entries must be submitted through our website. I'm afraid we don't accept email entries. So the address is up there, www.9dotsprize.org, and there's a submission form there that you just work through, putting in certain information and then attaching your documents. There's certain things you must be 18 years or over, and your entry must be written in English. And importantly, you must be able to complete the book on time. I'm afraid there are no extensions, there's no deferrals for this. If we announce you as the winner in May next year, we'll be asking you to hand in the completed book on the 1st of January 2024. That's actually a really tight turnaround to write a book. So we need you to have really had to think about whether you are able to turn that around in that time. Then we're really strict on two things: the deadline for submissions and the word limits for submissions. And the reason that we do this is that we're going to ask the winner to write us a book to a certain limit, and on a very strict timetable. So we feel that showing us that you can do that by submitting on time and to the word limit is quite a good start. So the deadline for the entries is midday on the 23rd of January 2023. Now it's midday in the UK. Often people think we mean midnight, and we don't. And the reason for that is so that, frankly, I'm awake in London at the time when the deadline is, so that if there's any problems, if you're, you know, the site crashes or anything, I'm awake and can deal with it. That makes more sense to me. I know a lot of competitions finish at midnight, but ours finishes at midday, and that's the reason why. We also have very strict word limits. So your summary document should be no more than 3,000 words. Your chapter outline should be no more than 1,000 words, and your justification statement should be no more than 1,000 words. Now, references, tables, figures, all of those things do not count towards those word limits. But those two things we're very strict on, so please do take that into account. I should also say that we've usually had over 700 applications each cycle, and about half of those applications come in the last 24 hours. So I would just emphasize, if you're trying to submit in the last 10 minutes before, you know, that midday deadline, please try and do it a bit before then, because there's a lot of people trying to press send at that towards that midday deadline, and I'm afraid we can't be responsible if your entry doesn't make it through because, you know, you've just left it a little bit too late. So I completely get it. I get deadlines, you know, I completely get why, you know, that it seems to be sensible to leave it as late as possible, but maybe not quite the last 10 minutes. So that's my plea from someone who has to deal with the very agonized emails straight afterwards of people going, did you get it? Did you get it? The things we leave up to you, pretty much everything else. We don't really mind how you write it. We don't mind whether you use references or not. We don't mind how you define the question, what you leave in, what you put in. All of those things we completely leave up to you, so that you can answer the question in the best way that you think possible. So I hope that gives you an idea that we've got these things that we're very strict about. Everything else we're really interested to see how you answer the question. Now, this is the good bit. If you were a winner, not only do you get quite a sizable chunk of money, I think we can say, $100,000, you get some really nice additional things to help you really make this the best book that you can write. So you get a book contract with Cambridge University Press, and along with that, you get access to a senior editor throughout this process. So right from when you're announced as the winner, you have a sort of team of people around you. I'll do them in the first order. I'll just say about Riot, and then I'll actually ask Joanna to sort of talk about the CRASSH support. But we also work with a team of PR team called Riot Communications, and they would be there to work with you around all this sort of publicity events around both the winner announcement and when your book is actually published. And Joanna, do you want to say a bit about what the winner would get when they're based at CRASSH, if they choose to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's completely optional if you're a winner, but we really encourage you to take up this opportunity. You can come to CRASSH and spend a term here, and that will enable you to do various things. So we can arrange access to any libraries or archives that you want to consult. And while you're here, we're actually just across the road from the main university library. You can have desk space as well in the centre if you would like that. There's also an opportunity to present your work in progress to groups of people who may be very interested in your ideas and can give you some early feedback. CRASSH also puts on a huge range of seminars and other events every week. So you may well find that there's events going on here that you would like to become involved in, that you would like to participate in. But I guess more than that, there's a whole lot of intangible benefits that we think that brings to the prize winners. CRASSH is really a meeting place. It's where people all over the world come, they find each other, they talk, and when they talk, things happen. So we would really love you to be part of that community with us.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, and I know previous winners have found that so valuable, just exactly as Joanna says there. So the really key points, this cycle's question is, why has the rule of law become so fragile? Our deadline is, as I say, midday GMT London time on Monday, the 23rd of January 2023. And hopefully all the information you need is on our website and the address is there. Now, we've tried to put a lot of guidance on the website. We've got blogs, we've got podcasts, we've got little videos that maybe help, but we've got a really lot of questions come in. So Joanna, should we get onto those with the pre-submitted ones first, and then we can see if other ones are coming in?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to remind people that if you want to ask a question that isn't being answered, or that you're worried won't be answered, then do put it in the Q&A and we can monitor those as we go along. But yeah, let's just start with some of the ones that were submitted beforehand. So there's a group of questions, I guess, that are related to thinking about applying and the kinds of documentation that's needed, but also even before that, thinking about the question in itself. So we have a couple of questions about the question. The first one is, can you explain what you mean by the question? And the second one, which I think we'll take at the same time, can I disagree with the premise of the question? Is that allowed?
Yeah. Okay, well, taking the first one, can you tell me what you mean by the question? And I hope this doesn't sound unhelpful, but no, I'm not going to, because really what we want you to do is answer the question as it seems to you. The board, obviously we have 12 board members. They might have all meant something slightly different by this question. So we really don't want to reduce it down and say this is exactly the answer we're looking for. That's part of the real interest in for us in this prize, in that we don't quite know how people are going to take the question, which direction they're going to go off with it. So we don't ever sort of give more detail as to what we mean by the question. Can you disagree with it? Absolutely, because that's still engaging with it. As I say, we're not expecting a yes or no answer. But if you said you're asking the wrong question, if you're thinking about the rule of law, you should be talking about this. That's brilliant. So absolutely, you can disagree with us all you like. Yeah.
Right, and then if people are thinking about the kind of entry that they want to make, who should be the intended audience of the book?
That's a really good question. So I think because we're linked with a university and university press, sometimes people think these have to be quite academic books, and they really don't. That isn't what we're looking for. We're looking for a book that would be interesting to people who are interested in this topic. And so it really is quite a general audience, and I think you want to keep that in mind, that actually these aren't going to be specialists, for example. So this question is about the rule of law, which you imagine could come with some quite technical discussion around legal discussion, and we would want you to make that as accessible to a wide readership as possible.
Great. And then again, still thinking about audiences and the kinds of entries that people might want to make. In what ways could a personal angle be incorporated into the essay and eventually into the book?
Yeah, well, I think this is quite an important one, actually, because if we just said it has to be an academic style book, it needs to be a certain kind of evidence. But I think once you say that personal experience is counted as evidence in our view, that sort of really opens up to the way people could answer this question. I'll take as an example our second winner's book. Annie Zaidi wrote a memoir, and you know, it was called that. That's what it was. It was about growing up in India as a Muslim woman, and how those sort of identities are built around religion and place and language. And so she really used her own story to talk more widely about feelings of belonging, feelings of home, feelings of not belonging, and being, you know, a stranger in your own sort of hometown. So that was a way that someone used a very personal story, but to tell a bigger story. So I think sometimes when we get very personally based responses, it is important to show how they would reflect that in the full book, to make sure that, you know, the judges can see where you'll give that context, where you'd make that more relevant to all sorts of other questions.
Thanks, that sounds like really helpful advice. Next question is, are you looking for responses from particular political positions?
We're really not. And I know sometimes people say, oh, well, there's no point in me applying because I disagree with this, or I disagree with this person or that political position. And we're really not. I mean, what we want is really well argued, well evidenced pieces. So we're very open to, you know, to all perspectives. Yeah.
And then thinking about the different elements of the application, so one part of it is the justification statement.
Yeah.
What should go into that?
Well, really, that's your opportunity to tell us how you're going to make sure that this book gets done. And so that will vary a bit for different people. So some people might say, look, you know, you're giving me a good chunk of money. I'm actually going to pause my studies. I'm going to pause my job. You know, I'm going to live off this money so that I can really focus on getting it written. For some people, we know that that's not going to be practical, but you know, we need to know how you're going to work it so that this book will get sort of researched and finished. It's helpful a bit for us to know, do you think you might like to go to CRASSH? You know, is that something that you'd like to take up? But also, if you say, you know, that my family circumstance, my, you know, life circumstance just means that's not going to be possible, then, you know, we completely understand that. It's not that's a requirement. It's just something we think could really help, could be a really beneficial experience.
On that note, connected, I'm just going to take one of the live questions because it's related to that. Do sometimes people continue working full-time and then complete the book in their spare time? Obviously, that's something that they would need to set out very clearly in that justification statement. Have we ever had prize winners who've done that? We haven't.
No. All three of them have sort of stopped what they were doing in order to write this. And although it's absolutely not forbidden to work full-time while you're writing this, I would really strongly urge people to think whether that's possible, because actually it's quite a thing to try and write a book in 6 months, even full-time, you know, working on that. So trying to do that whilst also working full-time and, you know, families and lives and things, I think that would be quite tough. So I think, as you say, you'd have to give us a rationale in your justification statement as to how you were going to make sure that that was going to work.
Great, thank you. And then in relation to another part of the application, which is the 3,000-word summary of the response, should that be written in the same style as the eventual book?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the judges need to see from it is something around how the book might read, yes. But I think it doesn't entirely have to be for that. in exactly the same style. I know another question that had come in was, should it be the first chapter of the book? Should it be the conclusion? That kind of thing. And you're very welcome to do both of those things. But you are also very welcome to say, this is sort of, a bit of the introduction, as some of your 3,000 words. And this bit is going to talk about how I'm going to either expand on this, how I'm going to use fiction or use these case studies, or it's a way to tell the judges a bit more widely about your idea and how the book might go. Now, I know that the third piece that you have to submit is a sort of chapter outline, so that's quite specifically to make sure that you've thought about how the book might look. These are the sort of chapter headings, and this is how I might work through. But for example, if you were going to do a fiction entry, it feels helpful to me when I've read these to sort of see a piece of prose, so a piece of how is your fiction structured and how do you write, but then another part of that 3,000 words that really tells us, how am I going to use fiction in order to answer this question? And that isn't just about sort of this character's going to do this, or this is going to be the story or the plot line. It's really sort of more about how you're going to make use of the tools that fiction gives you in order to write the best response to the question.
Thanks. And then a technical question again about that summary response. And this is from somebody who's got the information already that references don't count in that 3,000 word limit. But she'd like to know, can you reference sources in that summary response and add a bibliography at the end that isn't counted in those 3,000 words?
Absolutely, yes. That's quite a good way to do it, actually, because I know some people in their chapter outlines also, want to have some references, and you can just put them all in one bibliography. So that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah. Just going back briefly to the justification statement, we've got a question from somebody who's asking if it would make sense in that part of the application to talk about personal qualifications or experiences that would make you the best author for this book.
It's really useful for us. I mean, we don't want people to think that they have to have had certain experiences, education or employment in order to answer the question, but it's really helpful for us to see where you're coming from, really. Why is this subject of interest to you? Is it because this is your job? Is it because this experience has happened to you? Is it just because you've absolutely been fascinated about this kind of thing since you were a kid? So that's just really helpful for us to sort of build a picture of you, because we don't have a lot of information about you, and that's really helpful for us.
Great. And then, a few more questions about the application process and entries that can be made. Somebody's asking, is it possible to make a joint submission? So 2 authors that would work together, perhaps on a single book?
Yes, absolutely it is. The only thing we say is it must envisage a complete book. We wouldn't want, for example, an edited collection where 10 different people did a different chapter each, so if you and one or a few others sort of see this as a whole book, but you're just working on it together, then yes, absolutely, that's fine.
Great. Is it possible to submit more than one response if you've got 2 fantastic ideas?
Brilliant. No,
can you submit more than one response?
You have to choose which brilliant idea you want to submit. No, only one per person, unfortunately, and one, if you were doing one individually and one with someone, that's 2. So unfortunately you can only submit one.
Okay. Someone's asked just for clarification, which I think is a really good question on that, the justification statement. Doesn't submitting biographical information contradict the intention to judge these anonymously?
Yeah, so that bit doesn't go to the judges. So the justification statement is only seen by the 9 Dots team. And so doesn't go to the judges. Okay, so we keep those separate so that the judges only get to see the summary response and the chapter outline. That's what they make their decisions on.
Okay, and there are a couple of people who are very interested to know, is it possible to read the 3,000 word essays that were submitted by the previous winners?
We don't release those, and I'll tell you for why. Because as anyone who has tried to write a book knows, what you come out with at the end may well be not at all what you thought you were going to write when you submitted your summary response. And we sort of don't want winners to feel that they've got to sort of, oh, I said I was going to do this, and but I've got this new way of thinking about it now that I'm writing it up. So we don't want them to sort of have to limit what they're writing about when they're writing the book. So we release extracts. So there are extracts on our website of all of the winning entries, but not the full 3,000 words.
Okay, thank you. Question here about publication. Once someone has submitted their entry, could they decide to publish it somewhere else?
Well, all of our applicants keep the copyright for these pieces all the way through. We don't ever take them. So in a way, you are welcome. It's yours. You can do what you like with it. What we do ask is, if possible, because the judges are trying to judge this anonymously, we ask if you can hold off doing anything else with it until the winner has been announced. But it's been a really lovely thing to see the sort of other life that some of the entries have, even the ones that don't win. We know people go on to publish them as personal blogs, or write the full book, or have a discussion, and a few people put their own entries up together and then sort of form discussions groups around them. So that obviously is brilliant to sort of keep the discussion going around these questions. But as I say, we'd ask if you wouldn't mind to not publish them until the judges have made their decision.
Great, thank you. I'm going to move on to now another block of questions, which is about the judging process.
Okay.
But if anybody who's attending still has questions about applications and entries, do feel free to post those as well, and we'll loop back to those. I guess the biggest question here is, what is the jury looking for in a response? Can you give us any insights into that?
Well, as I say, we do get around 700 applications odd each time. So trying to stand out amongst that crowd is tough. So I think the things that the judges are looking for are sometimes a sort of an interesting angle on a question. I would say the ones that I think it would be most difficult to win through are the ones that sort of take quite an overview of the whole question, of all the things you could talk about relating to the question. They do that at quite a surface level. It would be incredibly tough for that to sort of really leap out to the judges, I think. What tends to work better is if people say, I know there's all this other stuff that you could talk about, but I'm really going to focus on this part, this element, this aspect, and I'm going to use this evidence, these stories, in order to illuminate my point. So I think they're looking for a mix of ideas, a perspective on the question, and then of course a writing style that is accessible, readable, and they're looking for things that make them think, and so I know that's a bit vague, but that's sort of best I can come up with, I'm afraid.
Thank you. A question here from somebody whose native language isn't English.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, naturally, my writing might not be as perfectly crafted as a native speaker's in the sort of drafting stage. Would that negatively impact her application? Are there ways that you ensure that international applicants are considered, even though their English might not be perfect?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's why I've sort of emphasised the ideas part of this. I think if we can see that there's some real sort of gems in there, the real sort of, the ideas, like I was saying, a new perspective or a different way of thinking about the question, we can do some work with you. You'll have enough, I work very closely with the winner. as I say, there's teams at CRASSH, there's teams at Cambridge University Press to sort of help, especially people whose, English is not their first language, and all sorts of other reasons why. You might never have written a book before, and so there's all sorts of help and support we can give the winner. It would be more difficult for us to help you think of ideas, so that's what we're really looking for you to tell us in these submissions. What are the ideas that you want to write about?
Great. Is there a shortlist that is announced at some stage?
We don't actually. No, we only announce one winner. There's one winner to the Nine Dots Prize, and that was a decision we made. I mean, we're still quite a young prize. We've been going sort of 6-7 years now, and it felt better for us, and I think for the winner that there's just one. So that's how we do that.
Okay, and I guess related to that, is there an interview or an opportunity to answer questions from judges during the shortlisting and awarding process?
That's a really good point. We have sort of thought that there might be an opportunity. There might be sometimes where the board would like to do that. So we've sort of got it written into the constitution kind of thing, but actually we haven't ever needed to do it, interestingly. Each of our judging panels have really been able to make up their minds purely on the submissions and the chapter outlines. So I think that probably says quite a lot about the people who've won. They've been able to put over all the information that the judges need in those submissions. Yeah, we don't interview a few candidates or any of that. It is the decision is made in a sort of meeting with all of the entries in front of us.
Okay. Is there any feedback on the application? I'm guessing this is not the winning application. If your application isn't successful, is there any feedback?
Unfortunately, we're the Nine Dots team is very small, and with so many applications, it just isn't possible for us to give feedback, I'm afraid. I am really sorry. I know that I'm sure would be valued by people, but that's just not something we can provide, unfortunately.
Okay. Moving on to another series of questions now that have to do with winning the prize for that happy, successful person. How long before the prize is publicly announced do you notify the winner?
It's a bit variable because it depends when our board meeting, because our judges are in all bits of the world, and we sometimes don't have long, so not very long. I'll be as vague as that. Not very long, but we always announce by the end of May. So next year we'll announce by the end of May, but you might not know very far in advance at all.
Right. And actually this is a question that I might answer. Somebody says, I've got family commitments and it would be difficult for me to spend a term at CRASSH. Is this a problem? I think the answer is absolutely not. We'd love you to come, even if it's for a short period of time. And I think it would be beneficial for the reasons that I gave earlier, but it's absolutely not a problem if you can't come for whatever reason, really.
And Joanna, there's all sort of access to, I guess, online facilities now, especially after the pandemic, but yes, people would still be able to access libraries and
they can still access
discussion.
Digital resources. We also have some events that are run hybrid or online, so there'll certainly be ways in which we can try to involve you in the community, even if you can't physically be with us. Good. Somebody would like to know, can I spend the whole writing period abroad if it's relevant to my research?
You get to do this in the way that you want to. As I say, the thing that we're really strict about is that you've got to finish it by the 1st of January 2024. How you choose to do that is entirely up to you. Yeah, it may make sense to you to be somewhere else. It may make sense to you to be at CRASSH, and it may make sense to be, if you could only pitch up to CRASSH for 2 or 3 weeks, then do that. And so we'll try and help you to facilitate as flexible as possible that writing period.
Somebody would like to know, can I produce a website or a video to accompany the book, or should I only write the book?
Well, you're very welcome. Again, I'm going to say, as long as you finish the book, I don't really mind what else you do. And we also have teams around in sort of CUP, or that in the Nine Dots has access to sort of help if you wanted to do additional things alongside the book. Yeah, absolutely. We'd be very open for that. But as I say, for us, the book is the absolute sort of core element.
Yeah, somebody else just asking about the time at CRASSH. What should they be thinking about in relation to length of time, expenses, housing, etc.? So at the moment, we've made a provision for a term. A term in Cambridge is very short. It's 8 weeks. So that's the kind of length of time that we've been talking about. Yeah, I think anything else that you wanted to add there, Jane, in terms of accommodation we can help you find as well?
I know that Trish Lorenz, who was the last winner, spent a term at CRASSH, and yes, was had accommodation in one of the postgrad halls, I think. So, as Joanna said, was in this community of very international group of people, all doing really different things, and it was an absolutely core part of for her of that writing process, and I know she got a lot out of that.
Are there funds, apart from the prize money, are there other funds to help cover travel costs or housing expenses or translators?
No. Once we've given you that money, you choose to spend that. Obviously, that's then you know your funds. You choose to spend it as you would, but we don't give you anything additional alongside that. So you will get that in 3 stages. So you get a third as you're announced as the winner. You'll get a third as you submit the manuscript to us at the start of January, and you'll get the final third when the book is published in the May. So that's sort of up to you entirely how you spend it. Some people will use it to sort of cover a salary, you know, if they're putting work on hold. Some of it people use it for research assistance, as you say, or travel costs, or you know. So it's completely up to you. But that's the funds that you've got to work with, really.
Okay. Thank you. A few more questions coming in live, which we're going to do our best to respond to. Somebody would like to know, is the prize money taxable or non-taxable?
Yeah, it is taxable, and I'm afraid we don't help you with that, as in you because it would really depend on where you are in the world as to how that. So that will be something you'd need to think about. Yeah.
Okay. And who retains copyright over the eventual book? Is it the author or is it Cambridge University Press? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's the author, but you will we'd ask you to sign a contract with Cambridge University Press, which basically says you give them the right to publish it, but you retain the copyright at all points. We also, through CUP, are now looking at translations of that book. So, for example, I mentioned Annie Zaidi's book about growing up in India. So we're working with local publishers to get translations into particular Indian languages, you know, where the places that she was based, and you know, there might be really interesting that. So we work with Cambridge University Press and a wide range of publishers to sort of work on the translation. So that would be, but again, that's still your copyright, but that's us just trying to facilitate getting the book out to a wider audience.
You've given the deadline for the submission of the book as the 1st of January in 2024. How long would it take for that book to be published? What's the length of period between submission and publication?
So the book is always published in May of that year. So it takes about 4 months, which is incredibly quick if anyone knows sort of academic or other publishing. So it will go straight into the production process as soon as you submit it. There are various stages, so you'll have lots of comments from CUP, from me, on your earlier versions. That then goes into getting typeset. We think about the cover design, we think about how you want the book to look in the pages, we think about figures and photos, and you know, whether you want to use quotes and poems, and you know, so or thinking about how the book looks and feels, and then we usually have the book by the start of May, and we sort of work out a date when we can sort of do a big, here it is, and then people can download it for free on the website from that publication day, and physical copies are available. And we do find that quite a lot of people still want to buy these books, even though they can be downloaded for free. So there will also be physical copies that you can have and hold and give out to your friends and family.
Would the winning author get royalties on the sale of the book?
Yes, they do. Yes. So all of that is covered in the contract that you will sign with Cambridge University Press. But yes, there's some royalties. As I said, because we give it away for free online, this is not a sort of a big seller book, but of the ones that we do sell, you would get a percentage. Yeah.
And somebody's thinking about even further beyond publication. What happens after the book is published? What are the expectations on the author post-publication? We
do ask you to do a certain number, and I don't mean that in the sense of 3 or 5, but a few publicity events or around publication day. So that's often we try and get an interview with you, maybe in press, on radio. We do events often around book publication, so either with CRASSH or with CUP. We'd ask maybe to write a blog to go on the CRASSH website. So it's that kind of level of activity. So it doesn't sort of go on for very long. We do then try and pitch you to, for example, literary festivals. So definitely we've had previous winners speaking at the Hay Festival in the UK. We've had people at the Jaipur Literary Festival in India. So there might be other things that come up, but those are completely sort of in your choice to do or not. Yeah.
And all of that really is, I guess, is in the interest of a writer, isn't it? That kind of publicity, the opportunities that might arise from that.
Hopefully, yeah, hopefully, yes. But it is under your control. I guess that's the important point. We don't sort of stipulate exactly you must do this, and
yeah. The people who aren't successful, is there any way, for example, that they can gain in some way from having entered? You talked earlier about the fact that actually just getting your ideas together on paper has a value in itself, and that might kind of spur you on to do other things with those ideas. But somebody was asking, are the entries published in some way? The ones that don't win.
Yeah, not by us. As I say, I know other people have published them in different forms, whether personally, sort of so on personal blogs, or in magazines and other ways. I know, for example, the first cycle, because it was about digital technologies, an academic journal asked anyone who'd submitted to send them their entries, and they published an issue of the journal just with responses from people who'd submitted to the prize. So, but those happen sort of outside our control, so we don't do any of those. But we know other people have said to us, you know, I've published this, I've gone on to write the book, a set of us have sort of published something together, and there's also quite an active discussion on our Twitter thread, on our Twitter stream, with people sort of saying, oh, here's mine, you know, if anyone's got any comments, and so there's a discussion that happens once we've announced the winner in social media, on our social media.
That's interesting. Someone would like to know, are there any particular organizational connections or professional relationships that would disqualify somebody from applying?
What a good question. Well, I've not come across any so far, and I can't really think. So the only thing is, if you were related to a member of our board, you can't apply then. you are, well, if you're based at University of Cambridge, that's fine, because obviously that's a big organisation and we're not going to ban all Cambridge people from applying. But so those are the only sort of stipulations we have. If you're related to someone on the board or me, you know, that would disqualify you. But no, there aren't any other that I can think of that would impede that.
Okay. And a question about the judging process. Does every judge on the jury read every response, or do you split them up and then select on that basis?
Yes, that's it exactly. Because as I said, that's 700 would be quite a lot for all of us to read all of. So the ones that are eligible, so the ones that meet that criteria of word count limit and deadline and things, will be split up across the board, and they put them together as pairs, and so the board as a whole will look at as many applications as we can possibly manage.
And this is the last question that I have that's come in live, looping right back to the start. How did the question come about?
Well, we all get together in a room. Well, this time we got together in a room. Obviously, the last one we had to do over Zoom like this, last board meeting where we chose the question. And it's always really fascinating to see what different board members bring to, you know, these are the issues that I think are really important. I know in the past the board have said, even if there was massive things going on in the world, so the last time we chose a question, really the COVID pandemic was just hitting us, and the board really thought, we don't want to ask a question directly about COVID, you know, because that seemed like it would sort of maybe limit responses or make them of a particular time, and they didn't want to do that. So I guess the things that were in their minds when we chose this question, there was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. You know, we've seen very populist leaders such as Trump, Bolsonaro, you know, not quite as successful as they were, but maybe their sort of legacy. So there was sort of a real sense amongst the board members that issues around rule of law and how that maybe had been affected by some of these big events was something that they wanted to ask about. But that it's not sort of saying this must be about Russia and invasion of Ukraine. You know, it was trying to sort of look at it in a way that wouldn't make it so tied to a particular point of time.
Yeah, or a particular country.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to bring our time together now, but thank you, Jane, for answering so many questions. Thank you to the audience for being with us today. We're going to upload this recording onto the CRASSH website, and we'll tweet the link so that you've got it available if that's useful to you. We'd be very grateful if you could fill in a very short feedback questionnaire about this event that will be sent out to you via Eventbrite. And just to remind everybody to follow us on Twitter, other social media platforms. If you have other questions, you're very welcome to tweet them or to email them, and we'll do our best to answer them in the coming days. Sure. But thank you very much for attending. I certainly hope that we get lots of incredibly interesting responses. I'm really looking forward to reading them myself. Anything you'd like to say to end with, Jane?
Yeah, I think just to emphasize, thanks so much for taking time to think about the prize. We really hope that you are all going to apply, and yeah, we're absolutely fascinated to see what you're going to send in to us.
Great, thank you, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.